All right. So, hello, my name is Mary Angelis Rodriguez Espilin, and this is my video submission for the driver presentation. As part of our assignment, we were told to use one of our classmate mechanics that work well with our own mechanics. And I decided to use the time pressure switch made by Greg Oden, which I believe would be a good match for my own clone mechanic. I've created 3 levels, which I shall be showing off now, and then I will go over the blueprints created for the time pressure switches. Alright, so we're starting off with level 1 here. All 3 levels were created to make use of both the clone mechanic and the time pressure switch, while also adding in one last mechanic, the trap tile mechanic that I also included in last week's presentation. This fourth level is super simple. There's not much to it. It was created so that the player can get a feeling of moving around the clone and seeing how the time pressure switches work. I want to be going nice and slow in order to make it easy to see what's going on. But all the player does is spawn in the clone and lead the clone around. As seen before, the clone moves around even when the player cannot move that way, making it so that way they have different movement opportunities. Now, how the time pressure switches work, as you could see with that first example, is the player or the clone will step on the button, which will activate the door and will activate a timer. If the clone or the player fail to escape the door when it goes back down, they get crushed and the level restarts. The doors all have changeable duration, so it's perfectly possible to make one door 2 seconds, the other one 4 seconds, so on and so forth. Now, those black spots on the ground are the pit tiles, so all the player has to do is maneuver around and make sure they don't fall. And that last part there that you just saw was the trap tile activating and removing the door that kept the player away from the wind tile, and thus starts level 2. So this level 2, I created it to be a good bit harder than level 1, but not by much. It's still fairly simple. Like, unlike before, where the player had a majority of the walls to keep them from falling, the majority of this level is made up of pit tiles. The idea here is that the player has to maneuver both the player entity and the clone around, making sure that neither falls to restart the level, and get both of them to the corresponding tiles that will open up the path for the other. Alright, and finally we come to level 3. This level is a time trial, and I did make it a bit simpler than level 2. This level also features the teleport tile that we made within the fourth week of this class. And you will also notice that the color of the timer has changed. That's a change I made between these two takes as I realized that the color of the timer, I completely forgot to change it. That's my own mistake. But as I was saying, this level gives you 20 seconds to get from point A to point B, and features all 4 mechanics that I have created this month, along with the time pressure switch from Greg. And you can see all 3 levels are nice and simple, and made sure that all mechanics work well together, and I'm quite proud of them. Next, I'll move on to explaining how the uh time tile switches were made. Now within the editor, the designers only have to do 3 things. The first 2 come within the time trial but in itself, in which they first have to set what door matches with the button, and each button can only activate one door at a time. The second thing they have to do is add in the delay duration. So this one will go for 2 seconds, while this one will go for 4. Now it is possible to add text to the door for when the player passes over to it. I was not able to get the text to work with me, so while that option is still up there, it is not currently implemented within my levels. The last thing they would have to do to use this mechanic would be to, apologies, they will have to set the button that corresponds with the door. Like before, one door can only be corresponded with one button. Next, we will talk about the blueprints. The fourth blueprint I'll be going over will be the time trial blueprint, which is the button that the player will step on to start everything off. You notice some differences between mine and Greg's code, as some of the code he used didn't work with me. The first thing the tire will do when it is stepped on will be to check to see if the it's down boolean, is true or false. If it is true, nothing will happen, as that means that everything is already active. If it is false, the cylinder will be pushed down to show it as a button being pushed. The it's down boolean will be set to true, and the sound will be played at a random pitch. Afterwards, the handle obstacle function will begin. The handle obstacle function will set up the UI and set up the timer as well. I put it all here so it wouldn't clutter up the main blueprint. Now, once handle obstacle is done, it will then activate it within the door reference that is set within the editor. We will go over what happens when activate obstacle is started when we go towards the door blueprint. When the player steps off of the time tile, it will wait the given the duration from the editor before resetting the tile and resetting the cylinder, setting it down to false, and playing another sound. This time it will check to see if the player has passed the door, which the blueprint gets from the door reference, and if it is true, it will reset the timer and show the goal past text. Now this is mostly for resetting the timer because again, text did not want to work with me. That is everything that is included within the time tile blueprint. Finally, we come to the door blueprint. When it is entered or exited, the player and tile boolean is set either to true or false, and the player path door boolean is set to true once the player has stepped on it. Coming to the activate obstacle event, when it is activated, it will change the position of the door to visually show that it's now passable. It also changes the enterable boolean to be true. Now, within the timer that we use in the UI, there is an event called on timer reach goal. What happens here is that the code sets it up so when that event is called within the timer, it will activate the on timer limit event on this blueprint. The on timer reach goal event or on timer limit reached it'll reset the door, it'll make sure it's no longer enterable, and then it will check to see if the player or an entity is on the tile. Now, if there's nothing there, nothing will happen. But if there's an entity underneath the tile, when it goes back down, the entity will be killed and the level will then be reset. And that's all left to say. Thank you for watching this video and have a good day.